Ladies, gentlemen, everybody else that does not identify with either of these two categories. At this time of the conference, in the second half of the second day, I know you're all thinking about the same three questions. The first one is, will my return flight be on time? The second is, will I get my first class upgrade? And the third one is, have I already bought enough presents from my family? So I will get to these questions a little bit later, but in the meantime, I want to talk a little bit about sustainability. And we'll start with this simple picture. The road is long. We know by now that we have a long way to go until we reach the SDGs in 2030. We've heard all the statistics, we know the story, we reached the maybe 20% of the goals already. We have 300 years still to go to reach gender equality. We know the climate story, so there is a humongous task ahead of us. We're halfway now from 2015 until 2030, and we have much more than half of the trip still to go. The good news is that there are a lot of things going on. Many stakeholders are busy. Everybody's trying to do their best or most people actually are trying to do their best to reach some success. There is quite some financing available. Of course, we think it's always too little and too late, but there's a lot of money being spent on these projects. We have all kinds of indicators and measurements. We've talked a lot about indicators and measurements these 2 days, and there are deadlines. Oh yes, there are deadlines. The problem is that these forces that are trying to move us ahead, they are not always aligned. They are not always coordinated, and the cooperation needs to improve. So our mission with forming Sustainable Iceland last year was basically to try to streamline that process a little bit. So on we go, we said. And we know it's not going to be a straight line. That's too optimistic, but a little bit straighter than it is today. So Sustainable Iceland, I'll tell you more about that. In Icelandic, Sjálfbært Ísland, that's our logo there. We were tasked basically with trying to coordinate and cooperate and align the efforts in Iceland, both within the government and with the various stakeholders who are working on these issues. What we've done so far is that our first big project was to develop and create the so-called Voluntary National Review, the VNR, that will be presented in New York in July. That is basically a report explaining where we are at now with our work on the SDGs. That has been submitted, and it will be presented in a meeting in July. The second big project that we have undertaken is basically developing a policy or a strategy for sustainable development in Iceland. And we split that in two parts. First, and that's the part basically we have been doing so far, is that we developed a green paper or a green book where we're basically explaining the status, what is already happening, what we're doing so far, and what success we have already reached. So that's basically looking a little bit in the rearview mirror. The second part, and that's the one we are starting currently, is the white paper. That's basically looking ahead and trying to develop a coordinated strategy for Iceland on how we want to approach our work on sustainable development. And on a side note, actually, when I was developing those or making these slides this week, I thought it was pretty cool to use quotes from the Hollies as headers for the slides. So here is basically you have the full record. This is, of course, the record, He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother, from the Hollies. He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother is, of course, a euphemism for leaving nobody behind, which you heard over and over in the past few days. The only problem was when I was showing the slides to my super smart colleague, who is half my age. She had never heard this song. She had never heard about the Hollies. So that makes me think that makes me worry a lot that the generation that's taken over our work very soon, or already actually, there's a big gap in their musical education especially for the second half of last century, including the Hollies. So that's something we need to work on, and please put that on your agendas in everywhere where you're working. Yeah. I won't tell you all the media I'm active on. So this is our organizational chart, actually, but it's drawn on this single. And we have two circles. You see the inner circle, which is the yellow one. That's where we have the steering committee. So we're tasked with aligning the work of the government. So we have the steering committee, which has one representative from each of the ministries and one from the municipalities. So that's like a board that meets every month and makes kind of the decisions that we have to make. Then the outer circle, the black circle, where the music actually resides, that's our advisory council, which we call the Sustainability Council. And that has representatives basically from all the stakeholders or most stakeholders involved in this work. So you see there are the ministers, all the ministers of the government, the 12 are there. Our Prime Minister, Katrín, she is the chairman of that advisory council. We have the business sector, so representatives from all the different business segments. We have the municipalities, so more representatives from the municipalities, basically the regional organizations of the municipalities. We have the political parties, both in the ones represented in the government as well as the opposition, labor unions, and last but not least, the civil society. There are a number of associations represented there, including the youth, young environmentalists, the elderly, the Red Cross, religion, all these associations you can think about, they are represented there, which means that the Sustainability Council is 83 persons strong or something like that, which again means that we're not meeting very regularly, but this is basically a frame around or a framework around our network. So we are working with them when we're in all our strategy work. We have that network to go to, and they can supply us with inspiration and direction. The outside of that, the yellow circle and the black circle is, of course, the general public, and we've given that a lot of work and attention. Here are some of the photos from some of the meetings we've had. We basically toured the country with our Prime Minister, Katrín. We had 7 meetings in 7 different towns all around the country and an online meeting as well. And you see on the bottom of the slide a meeting with the youth, where basically the youth organization was presenting their ideas to the ministers of the government, basically explaining their priorities. And in the top right, you have a photo from one of the meetings where we were basically inviting the public, the general public, everybody could attend. We were showing them what we were doing and asking them for their input. And Katrín was there, and she basically walked between the tables, so everybody had the opportunity to address their priorities directly to the Prime Minister. So that was a very an activity that we were very happy about, and it gave us a lot of inspiration and input into our work. Now, in terms of the policy and strategy that we are developing, this is basically the twofold approach we are using. And I have been listening to many of your presentations yesterday and today, and also discussing it with you in the hallways, that we are basically thinking about these 2 ways of addressing the strategy work. And on the left, you have the maybe more typical content approach. There we have identified, we're working with that, these 7 kind of focus areas that we think that the strategy should involve. And these are circular economy, equal rights, health and well-being, education, culture and science, infrastructure and regions, food, land, water, energy and climate, of course, very important, and last but not least, international cooperation. And so these are the areas that we are working with. They may change during our work, and but we are trying to kind of identify what are the top priorities within each of these areas. So this is kind of the content focus. The other thing that the other approach, which is slightly different and has been discussed here also in the last in these 2 days a lot, and that is more to approach this as a method or a tool, where we basically would develop a method on how we do the impact assessment on everything we do. So basically, all the laws that are passed or suggested, they have to go through a certain appraisal process where we kind of basically assess them in terms of the, not only on the economic impact, which is the obvious thing and which is done very regularly or very rigorously currently, but also the impact on the environment and the society. Currently, we have an assessment impact process which is focused 90% on economy and finance, and the environment and the society are kind of footnotes in that impact assessment. So this lines very much, I think, with some of the presentations that we've seen already, also with the framework of the OECD and what other countries, New Zealand and Wales, have been presenting and more. So I think the focus of our work will gradually, or probably be even maybe more on this way, or let's say this angle of the discussion, rather than just focusing on the content. Because there is all the ministries and all the stakeholders are working on their own content, and the importance lies probably more in aligning the content rather than to create our own priorities. So that was basically in a nutshell what I want to present you today. I'm returning back some of the minutes that the other speakers have stolen, so we're trying to adjust here a little bit. And feel free to contact me anytime. We're always interested in listening to what you have to say. We appreciate the opportunity that we've had to discuss with you over the past today and yesterday, and to get your feedback and your insights. And to end this on a slightly optimistic note, the last quote from the Hollies: "We'll get there." Thank you.